Imagine a room filled with kings, generals, thinkers, and warriors. Some are brilliant tacticians, others are seasoned fighters. Some carry the wisdom of decades. And yet, in the game of power, the man who often bends the room to his will is not the strongest, not the smartest, not even the most prepared. It is the man who carries within him something more terrifying, more magnetic than logic. It is the man who believes, with no evidence, with no validation, with no permission, that he has already won. This is not confidence. This is not optimism. This is delusion. And in a world obsessed with reason, where people beg for proof before they dare to act, delusion becomes the rarest and most dangerous weapon of all. Delusional belief is not about pretending. It is not about lying to yourself with affirmations or shallow motivation. It is about bending reality through the sheer force of certainty. It is about building a mental fortress so unshakable that doubt cannot enter, no matter how loudly the world screams against you. Machiavelli understood this. In The Prince, he rarely celebrated balance, moderation, or humility. No, he celebrated results. And results are not born from cautious men who wait for the right time. Results are forged by men who dare to act as if the crown is already theirs, even when their hands are empty. Let's pause here. Ask yourself, who are the figures you remember from history? Are they the quiet, careful men who blended in? Number. History does not remember the reasonable. History remembers the mad, the audacious, the ones who declared greatness long before anyone agreed with them. Alexander the Great wasn't satisfied with being king. He believed he was the son of Zeus, literally. This belief wasn't harmless fantasy. It was fire. His soldiers fought like they were following a god. His enemies trembled like they were facing a god. And when retreat would mean denying his divine blood, retreat was never an option. His delusion didn't just protect him, it infected everyone around him. Now consider Napoleon. He didn't kneel before the Pope to be crowned emperor. He seized the crown with his own hands, placing it on his own head. That moment was not arrogance. It was psychological warfare, a declaration, I do not need permission. I am the authority. And think of Muhammad, standing in Mecca, facing tribal hostility, risking execution for his message. No armies, no resources, no worldly protection, only belief. A belief so violent, so absolute, that it spread until it carved an empire. Do you see the pattern? The men who shift history do not wait until it makes sense. They do not beg for acceptance. They move as if their destiny has already been written, and in that movement, the world eventually bows. Machiavelli would whisper to us, in the game of power, delusion often beats reason. Why? Because people don't follow facts. They follow conviction. They follow certainty. And the one who is most certain, even if wrong, bends the uncertain majority to his will. Look at the entrepreneurs who built empires without a finished plan. Look at the leaders who seized loyalty before they had the means to deliver. Look at the competitors who acted like they had already won, and suddenly, their opponents began to believe it too. Delusional belief creates momentum. Momentum silences doubt. Momentum bends reality. Now let's strip it down to the raw truth. You don't need validation. You don't need permission. You don't need proof that you are ready. The delusional man doesn't wait for proof. He becomes the proof. This is the first step toward power. Weaponized delusion. A belief in yourself so blinding that it terrifies the cautious and silences the critics. But here's the secret Machiavelli knew. Delusion is not weakness. It is construction. It is strategy. It is the foundation upon which domination is built. In the next part, we'll break down how delusion transforms from a spark inside your mind into a fire that consumes entire nations. How a single belief, held with unshakable certainty, infects armies, seduces crowds, and rewrites history itself. But before we move forward, remember this: the world does not reward the careful. It does not protect the reasonable. It does not immortalize the humble. It rewards the man who dares to believe he is chosen, long before anyone else dares to. And that man, whether mocked as mad, dismissed as arrogant, or feared as dangerous, eventually becomes unstoppable. We've seen that delusional belief is not a fantasy. It is not daydreaming. It is a weapon. But how does it actually work? How does a thought, fragile in the beginning, become so powerful that it bends the will of crowds, armies, even empires? Let's break down the mechanics of delusion, the architecture behind the madness. Most people live their entire lives waiting for recognition, waiting for opportunity, waiting for someone to tell them, yes, you're ready now. That instinct is the first prison. Machiavelli's prince doesn't wait to be crowned. He doesn't wait for noble approval or divine blessing. He takes the throne and manufactures his right to rule. This is the first law of delusion. Act as though the crown is already yours. Every time you hesitate, every time you ask for permission, you give your power away. But when you destroy the need for validation, when you move without waiting, you take the first step toward becoming untouchable. Your words are architecture. Every sentence builds a structure that either imprisons you or expands your empire. Most people betray themselves with weak language. I hope. I'll try. Maybe, if I'm lucky. These are the words of the defeated. The delusional man does not hope. He declares. He does not suggest. He prophesies. This will happen. I am inevitable. It's already decided. Why does this matter? Because people are wired to detect uncertainty in speech, but they are also wired to obey conviction. When you speak with absolute certainty, others begin to conform, not because they truly believe in you, but because they are overwhelmed by the force of your belief in yourself. The body does not lie. Your movements broadcast your belief system before your words ever reach the room. Slouched shoulders whisper insecurity. Hesitant steps announce weakness. Avoided eye contact screams submission. But the delusional man? He moves like he already owns the floor. He holds his posture like a general surveying his army. He makes eye contact like a king receiving tribute. He walks with the rhythm of inevitability. This isn't acting. This is conditioning. You are training your nervous system to respond as though power is your natural state. And over time, it becomes reality. Here lies the greatest test. The world will throw facts in your face. Your failures, your lack of resources, your lack of experience, your bank account, your so-called limitations. It will hand you spreadsheets, statistics, and logic that scream you are not ready. The delusional man doesn't ignore this. He destroys it. He refuses to let reality dictate his vision. He looks at the evidence and says, irrelevant. This is not denial. It is rebellion. It is the refusal to let current circumstances define the future. When your mind is already 5 years ahead, living in the empire you have not yet built, the numbers of today lose their power over you. Once you build delusion, the world will attack it. Doubt will not just come from your enemies. It will come from friends, from family, from your own thoughts late at night. Be realistic, they will whisper. Don't risk too much. Stay humble, but humility is the death of myth, and realism is the graveyard of kings. You must guard your belief like a fortress. Silence the doubters, even the ones who mean well. Protect the legend you are building, even if it means walking alone. because once the delusion is protected long enough, it begins to harden into truth. And when the world adapts to your myth, you are no longer seen as mad. You are seen as chosen. Here is the secret. The mechanics of delusion are not mystical. They are practical. You stop asking. You start declaring. You stop hesitating. You start moving. You stop obeying reality. You begin rewriting it. And this is why delusional belief terrifies the cautious. Because it frees you from the chains that keep everyone else waiting, begging, doubting. The delusional man has already decided. And that decision, when enforced daily through words, movement, rebellion, and protection, becomes unstoppable. Machiavelli knew it well. Appearances are more powerful than truth. Illusion is stronger than logic. And when you build the illusion so completely that even you cannot tell where it ends and reality begins, that is when you become a force that others cannot resist. In the next part, we'll go even deeper. We'll study the psychological infection of delusion, how your certainty spreads like fire into the minds of others, how it makes them obey, conform, and even fight for your belief as if it were their own. But for now, remember this. Delusion is not a thought. It is a system. And if you build it brick by brick, protecting it like your life depends on it, one day, the world will no longer question it. It will kneel to it. A delusion locked inside your skull is powerful, but limited. It can elevate you, harden you, and make you relentless. But power is never solitary. To rule, to dominate, to change history, your delusion must spread. It must leave your mind and infect others until they no longer see your belief as madness, but as destiny. This is the machinery of psychological infection. The way emperors rise, the way religions form, the way movements are born. Humans are not rational beings. They are sponges. They absorb conviction like a disease. Place one hysterical man in a crowd, and soon the entire mob howls. Place one soldier who refuses to retreat, and soon the entire line holds its ground. Your belief, once hardened, becomes more than yours. It leaks through your words, your posture, your eyes, your silence. Others begin to feel it before they understand it. That is the moment delusion mutates into something greater. Faith. At first, people doubt you. They mock, they whisper, but secretly, they watch. They watch because certainty is magnetic. Even when they don't believe in your vision, they are drawn to the question. What if he's right? It only takes a crack in their skepticism, a single pause in their ridicule. Once curiosity enters, the infection has begun. Here is where the spread accelerates. People begin to imitate you, sometimes unconsciously. They borrow your language. They adjust their tone to match yours. They copy your posture, your cadence, your conviction. They don't yet believe fully, but they rehearse belief through imitation. And in rehearsing, they prepare their minds to accept your delusion as their reality. This is why Machiavelli urged rulers to stage appearances, rituals, processions, symbols. When people mimic the ceremony of belief, they soon surrender to the substance of belief. Mockery turns to defense. Doubt turns to advocacy. Now, those who once dismissed your delusion become its soldiers. They explain your vision to others as if it were their own. They fight arguments on your behalf. They spread your myth without needing your presence. Notice the genius of this stage. Your delusion multiplies itself. You no longer carry the burden of convincing. The infected now carry it for you. And the more they repeat the myth, the deeper they trap themselves in loyalty, because abandoning it would mean admitting their own foolishness. Here is where the infection becomes unstoppable. Once enough people believe, or pretend to believe your delusion, it becomes reality. Not because it was true from the beginning, but because the crowd decided it was true through sheer numbers. This is how conquerors are crowned. This is how nations are born. This is how men with nothing but madness in their minds carve empires into the earth. Understand this. Reality is not democratic. It is dictated by the strongest belief multiplied across the greatest number of people. Repetition. A lie repeated enough times becomes accepted truth. A vision repeated enough times becomes destiny. Symbols. People cannot hold abstract ideas for long. Give them a symbol, a banner, a gesture, a phrase, and your delusion becomes something tangible they can grasp. Spectacle. Public displays of certainty, even staged, amplify infection. The Romans staged triumphs not because they needed parades, but because the sight of victory creates the illusion of inevitability. Martyrdom. When your belief is attacked and survives, the attack itself strengthens the myth. People admire endurance more than logic. Do not mistake this for cheap manipulation. Once you spread delusion, you must live it. The myth demands your blood. If you hesitate, if you crack, the infection dies. You cannot afford weakness. You must become the very thing you invented, or be destroyed by your own followers. That is why many rulers live lives of torment. They are prisoners of their own delusion. But for those who endure, the reward is immortality. He knew that men obey appearances more than substance, that they are seduced by certainty, not by reason, that if you speak like a prophet and act like a king, they will kneel long before you prove yourself. Delusion, once spread, is no longer madness. It is order. It is law. It is history. In the next part, we will explore the dark side of delusion, how it crushes enemies, manipulates rivals, and rewrites morality itself. Because belief, once weaponized, is not just about growth. It is about war. Delusion, once solidified and spread, is not just belief. It becomes a weapon sharper than any blade, more devastating than any army. Why? Because it doesn't simply fight enemies on the battlefield. It corrodes their minds. It weakens their spirit. It makes them surrender before the war has even begun. This is the Machiavellian art of weaponizing delusion. Your enemy's greatest strength is his conviction that you can be defeated. Remove that, and his armies crumble before the first clash. Think of Alexander the Great. Half his victories were won before his troops even marched, because his enemies believed he was unstoppable. Was he a god? Number. But he acted like one, spoke like one, and carried his delusion so convincingly that entire kingdoms surrendered without resistance. This is the first lesson. Make your belief so unshakable that your enemies doubt themselves before they even test you. Doubt kills more soldiers than swords. Here lies a paradox. When you are weak, delusion is even more dangerous, because it hides your weakness and projects a phantom strength that blinds your opponents. Machiavelli warned rulers, never show your true weakness. Instead, weaponize delusion. If your resources are limited, exaggerate them. If your army is small, make it appear fearless. If your power is fragile, present it as eternal. The Romans called this virtues not mere courage, but the performance of invincibility. Enemies fear what they cannot measure. One of the deadliest uses of delusion is bait. When your rivals believe your myth, you can lead them into traps of their own making. Consider this. A ruler exaggerates his wealth. His enemies grow greedy, thinking they can seize it. They attack recklessly, only to find they have stepped into an ambush. Or a general convinces the world he is planning one great invasion. His enemies concentrate their defenses in the wrong place, while his real strike falls where they are weakest. Delusion clouds the enemy's judgment. They stop seeing reality and instead fight shadows you have planted in their minds. Here is the most dangerous transformation. When delusion does not just command armies, but dictates morality itself. If enough people believe your myth, your actions are no longer judged by truth, but by the lens of that myth. A conqueror becomes a savior. A tyrant becomes a father of the people. A manipulator becomes a prophet. Morality bends to power, and power bends to delusion. The people will excuse your cruelty, forgive your treachery, and even worship your destruction, if it fits the story they already believe. Weaponized delusion does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it says nothing at all. A ruler who believes so deeply in his inevitability does not need to argue with critics. His silence speaks louder than any rebuttal. When you are unbothered by slander, rivals begin to panic. Why is he so calm? What does he know that we don't? Doubt spreads in their camp like a plague, and soon they destroy themselves without you lifting a sword. Here is another tactic. Let your enemies choke on their own perception of you. When you project an image of ruthlessness, they will assume you are plotting even when you are not. They will exhaust themselves in paranoia, fortifying every corner, suspecting every shadow while you conserve your strength. This is why Machiavelli said it is better to be feared than loved. Fear weaponizes delusion more effectively than admiration. Admiration is fragile. Fear is eternal. But let us not romanticize this. Weaponizing delusion demands sacrifice. You will be hated. You will be slandered. You will live under the weight of your myth, unable to rest, unable to step outside the legend you created. Enemies will gather in secret. Rivals will conspire in silence. The higher your delusion rises, the more it threatens others, and the more they will attempt to drag you down. But this is the price of empire. This is the price of immortality. Those who cannot bear the burden of their own myth remain forgotten. Those who carry it until the end carve their names into eternity. He understood that politics is not about truth. It is about perception. That victory is not always won by armies, but by belief. That if your enemies believe in your inevitability, the war is already over. Weaponized delusion is not about deceiving others for a moment. It is about bending their reality until they cannot imagine a world without your dominance. And this is where the art sharpens into danger. When you no longer just believe for yourself, but when you dictate what others believe for you. That is not madness. That is mastery. Delusion gives you strength. It spreads to others. It crushes your enemies. It rewrites morality itself. But make no mistake, it is not a gift without poison. Every weapon cuts both ways, and delusion, once weaponized, becomes not just your tool, but your prison. This is the dark burden of delusion. The isolation, the paranoia, the endless vigilance that comes with carrying a myth greater than yourself. The higher you rise, the lonelier you become. Why? Because the deeper your myth spreads, the harder it is for anyone to see you. Friends no longer approach you as a human. They bow before the legend. Allies no longer speak with honesty. They calculate what the myth demands of them. Even lovers hesitate, unsure if they embrace the man or the mask. Machiavelli warned rulers never to trust affection. Why? Because most of it is theater. And once your delusion becomes law, every smile may hide a blade. So the crown sits heavy, not because it is gold, but because it cuts you off. No one truly knows you anymore. You become untouchable, but also unreachable. Delusion infects followers, but it also infects enemies. And once you are seen as inevitable, you are also seen as intolerable. Understand this. The same myth that makes people kneel will also make others plot. Envy sharpens daggers in the dark. Fear breeds conspiracies. Rivals gather in shadows, whispering, "He must be stopped before it's too late." This is the paradox. The more your delusion grows, the more enemies you create simply by existing. You do not need to act against them. Your legend itself threatens their survival, and so paranoia becomes your companion. You trust no one fully. You sleep lightly. You live in anticipation of betrayal. Here lies the cruelest truth. You can never step outside of the myth you built. Once you declare yourself inevitable, you cannot afford hesitation. Once you present yourself as invincible, you cannot afford weakness. Once you claim destiny as your right, you cannot confess doubt. You become a prisoner of your own theater. Even when you are exhausted, you must project strength. Even when you are uncertain, you must display clarity. Even when you are breaking inside, you must appear untouched. This is the cost of delusion. It consumes the man to preserve the legend. Many rulers, prophets, and conquerors fall not to enemies but to themselves. Their delusion, once their greatest weapon, devours them from within. They begin to question, am I still leading the myth, or has the myth swallowed me whole? For some, the line between truth and delusion blurs until they no longer know which is which. They lose themselves in their own performance. What began as strategy becomes madness. What began as armor becomes a coffin. Machiavelli himself saw this in the princes of Italy, men who rose by myth but perished by believing too deeply in their own illusion. When the crowds cheer, when armies kneel, when banners rise in your name, you may feel invincible. But when night falls and the palace is silent, you realize the solitude of power. You cannot share your doubts. You cannot confess your fears. You cannot escape the role. Every pair of eyes that looks at you sees only the delusion you created, and in that moment, you understand the true burden. To be worshipped is to be exiled from humanity. And yet, would you choose differently? Because while delusion isolates, it also immortalizes. While it breeds paranoia, it also bends the world to your will. While it makes you a prisoner, it also makes you a god in the eyes of others. This is the brutal truth. Greatness demands a sacrifice, and the sacrifice is peace. Those who cling to comfort remain forgotten. Those who embrace the prison of their own myth are remembered forever. He never promised rulers peace. He promised them survival. He never promised them happiness. He promised them power. And he knew that power is a throne built on knives, glorious to behold, but merciless to sit upon. Delusion is the path to domination. But domination is a path paved with blood, suspicion, and solitude. So you must decide, is the price worth paying? Will you embrace the loneliness, the paranoia, the prison in exchange for immortality, or will you trade it away for safety, for comfort, for mediocrity? Because history has made its choice. It does not remember the comfortable, it remembers the delusional. Delusion begins as a thought. It grows into conviction. It spreads into infection. It sharpens into a weapon. It poisons into a burden. But here is where the cycle completes. Delusion, carried to its fullest, transcends death. It outlives the body. It becomes immortality. This is the ultimate reward for those who dare to believe in themselves beyond reason. While ordinary men rot in silence, the delusional carve their names into time itself. Every empire falls. Every conqueror dies. Every throne turns to dust. But the myth, the delusion turned into story, survives. Alexander the Great lived only 32 years, yet his delusion of godhood spread so deeply that centuries later, men still invoked his name in awe. Julius Caesar was stabbed by senators, but his myth grew so immense that emperors after him took his name as a title, Caesar. Napoleon was exiled and defeated, yet his shadow haunted Europe for generations. The man perishes. The delusion becomes eternal. How does delusion survive beyond its creator? Followers as storytellers. Those infected by your certainty carry it forward. Even after your death, they repeat your vision until it becomes history. Symbols as anchors, flags, monuments, rituals. These crystallize your myth into something tangible, unbreakable by time. Enemies as prophets. Ironically, those who hated you often keep your myth alive longer than your friends. For in warning others of your danger, they repeat your name endlessly. Institutions as vessels. Laws, dynasties, orders, and movements extend your delusion into structures that endure centuries. You may vanish. But if your delusion is embedded in people, symbols, enemies, and institutions, you do not vanish. You live on. Here lies the final trick. History does not care if your delusion was true. It only cares if it was grand. Madmen vanish, visionaries endure, but often they are the same men, separated only by whether their delusion outlived them. Think of prophets. At first, they are dismissed as lunatics, false messiahs, unstable dreamers. But when their vision spreads, when it infects the hearts of thousands, they become sacred. The very delusion that made them outcasts now crowns them immortal, but immortality demands the highest cost. You cannot live small. You cannot bow to realism. You cannot shrink yourself to fit the comfort of others. To live forever in the minds of men, you must burn in your own lifetime. Sacrifice peace. Sacrifice safety. Sacrifice even your humanity if you must. Because history does not care about the happy life you lived. It only remembers the impact you forced upon it. Machiavelli understood this truth with brutal clarity. A prince is judged not by his intentions, but by his results. And the greatest result is this, that he is remembered long after his body turns to dust. So what must you do? Believe before anyone else believes. Infect others until they fight for your vision. Weaponize your myth against rivals and enemies. Endure the prison of your legend even when it isolates you. Anchor your delusion into symbols, stories, and structures that outlast you. Do this, and your life becomes more than flesh. It becomes story. It becomes legend. Look around you. The masses live quietly. They obey reality. They accept their limits. They die forgotten. Then there are the few, the delusional, the mad, the untouchable. They tear reality open with their belief. They live like storms. They die like kings. And they remain forever in memory, in books, in monuments, in whispered stories. This is the divide: to live safe and disappear, or to live dangerously and never die. Delusion is not weakness. It is not madness. It is the highest form of power, because it does not end with you. It creates a reality that continues beyond your grave. Machiavelli would tell you, men are forgotten, not because they lacked virtue, but because they lacked audacity. The bold, the ruthless, the delusional, they are remembered because they dared to declare themselves immortal long before the world agreed. So I leave you with this. Do not settle for realism. Do not settle for comfort. Build a delusion so vast, so unshakable that it becomes history itself. Because in the end, reality is temporary. But the legend, the myth you forge with your belief, is forever. Remember this. The world does not reward the cautious. It does not celebrate the reasonable. It does not honor the realistic. The world bows only to those who dared to declare themselves inevitable. Delusion is not insanity. It is strategy. It is the refusal to let others decide your limits. It is the audacity to crown yourself king before a throne exists. And if you hold that belief long enough, fiercely enough, relentlessly enough, the world will bend until your delusion is no longer delusion, but destiny. The question is not, can you do it? The question is, will you pay the price? Will you endure the loneliness, the paranoia, the endless war against doubt? Will you carry the burden of a myth greater than your flesh? Will you sacrifice peace for power and comfort for immortality? Because in the end, history remembers only two kinds of people: the masses, who lived quietly, obeyed reality, and disappeared, and the few, the ruthless, the audacious, the delusional, who declared themselves immortal and became legend. So choose. Stay safe, stay forgotten, or embrace the madness that makes you eternal. The world will not remember your doubts. It will not remember your fears. It will remember only the myth you dared to live. Be delusional, be inevitable, be untouchable.